Ben, how you doing?
I'm good. I actually was at the Hall & Oates concert on Tuesday night. Get some Hall & Oates deep cuts in there.
Now I'm jealous. I still would have liked to have caught that show, although I was mainly going to see the opener, St. Paul and the Broken Bones, which if you've never seen them before, they are tremendous. But I wanted to touch base with I wanted to touch base with you today because I think you've covered college basketball at a level that Alabama is aspiring to get to. Not consistently, but they'd like to have a season like Kentucky has every year, once every 5 years or so. And so you're around the type of athlete that might have been caught up in a scandal like we've seen this week. When you're around that level, how much are you aware of what they're calling the sneaker company wars and the backroom agents and deals and some of that stuff that goes on?
I covered a fair bit of college basketball and a fair bit of big-time college basketball. The one thing that I didn't cover a whole lot of was college basketball recruiting, and I think that's probably a lot more where it gets into it. When you have some of these AAU teams of 15, 16, 17-year-olds that are sponsored by some coaches, that are sponsored by shoe companies, some of these tournaments that are just stuffed full of college coaches, head coaches and assistants, and some of these AAU coaches are really good coaches who put a lot of time in and do a really good job of developing players. Some of them are guys who are, just kind of butchers up at the meat market. It really kind of depends. But even if you don't cover college basketball recruiting, still covering some major college basketball programs, you get a sense of it a little bit on the periphery. When John Calipari came to Kentucky, one of the questions that people had was how involved World Wide West would be. He's not a guy that you hear about a lot, but he is a guy that you see at Kentucky games pretty regularly. Not everyone, but he's there from time to time. You see him around a little bit, and you kind of do get a sense that there are some power players behind the scenes that you don't always talk to or hear about, but they're there.
Yeah, and specifically, World Wide West is affiliated with Nike, correct?
Yes, he's associated with LeBron James, a lot of other folks.
I think what a lot of the layperson doesn't understand or comprehend is how do athletes from the ages of 15 up to 16, 17 before they go to college, how do they get affiliated with shoe companies? Because I think most people who are fans of collegiate sports understand the NCAA rules that they can't profit or they can't make any kind of financial benefit from their name or likeness. So how does a kid that's on the surface not benefiting from a relationship with a sneaker company at all, how do they get affiliated with them so early, and why are they so loyal to these sneaker companies where ostensibly they're not supposed to be making any money off of them?
Yeah, the easiest connection to draw is, and probably the most visible, is the AAU teams. You can go and look, and any significant high school basketball recruit is probably known as much for what he does, if not more, on the AAU circuit than what he does during his high school season. And every major AAU team has an apparel sponsor, a shoe sponsor. That's a company that helps provide a lot of the funding for some of these teams, so they can travel around and do a lot of these tournaments. So that all of the cost doesn't necessarily fall on the kids and their families. Some of those relationships end up lasting for years and years when the shoe company is affiliated with a high school player's AAU team. It's not unusual to see a guy who was with a team that was sponsored by Adidas or Nike or Under Armour go to a college that has the same affiliation. It's not like that exclusively happens, but it certainly does happen, and you've heard some coaches talk about that publicly. I think one of the differences for folks who follow college football a little bit more than college basketball, one of the important distinctions to understand is that there's a lot more money involved in some of these shoe deals for college basketball players entering the NBA than there is in some of the apparel deals for NFL players when they come out. I was talking with someone yesterday and used the example of Jonathan Allen. Jonathan Allen was, about as big a star as you could have in college football. He was National Defensive Player of the Year, won a national championship, an All-American, played at Alabama on the biggest stage that you have. I have no idea what Jonathan Allen's sponsor was when he ended up going into the NFL, even though he was a first-round draft pick. Whereas a guy playing kind of at a similar level in college basketball, a guy who had been a lottery pick coming out of a major program that had been a star for a couple of years, he would have probably signed a shoe deal worth, $10 million a year, 10-year, $100 million shoe deal, something like that. The money in college basketball for those guys going into the NBA at a high level is just different than what it is for college football.
Ben, I'm not going to ask you to answer for the NCAA, but in your opinion, why do you think the NCAA allows a relationship that can be tainted, or the start of a financial relationship to begin when these kids are in high school? And again, and I'm hearing you, no money's changing hands directly to the athletes, but they're sponsoring their teams. And it seems like this would be ripe for an NCAA to come down and say no. I mean, you got the NCAA telling a kid he can't have a YouTube channel and profit off of it, but they're allowing sneaker companies to pour all this money into AAU teams, and it just seems like that relationship is ripe to be fraudulent.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes back to the difference between what you know and what you can prove. If something seems like it's fishy on the surface, I don't know that that's enough for the NCAA to come down and sanction anyone that's involved or to change anything that's involved. You remember, the NCAA is made up of the member schools. The NCAA is a voting block of universities that take part in college athletics. And so those universities, to pass legislation, would have to vote to remove some of that stuff. And I don't know if necessarily the universities want to get all that out. If the college coaches and athletic administrators who vote on this stuff in the NCAA want to make it not a part of the game, if they wanted to legislate some of it out, they would probably have the power to do that. But obviously that hasn't happened to this point.
Yeah, and I think it's also fair to note that a lot of these universities have very lucrative sneaker apparel deals of their own. Alabama, one of them,
Yep.
Alabama has a very lucrative Nike contract, which, by the way, is up for negotiation and expires in 2018, and Alabama will be looking to cash it in based on all the publicity and how well they've played in football over the last decade. Switching over to football, Ben, what have you made of the first 4 weeks of the season for Alabama? It's been anything but consistent. We just haven't seen a back-to-back consistent performance in all areas. They've played well in certain aspects in one game and in other aspects not so well. But what do you make of this team this year? And as it translates to college football as a whole, is it more indicative that there's maybe not one or two or three dominant teams this year?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to point it out. Coming into the season, I thought that there were probably three programs around the nation that were kind of at the top tier, just talent-wise, the way that the roster was built. Those three teams being Alabama, Florida State, and Ohio State. And it sure seems like right now Florida State and Ohio State are not in the same tier of what Alabama is this year, regardless of anything else that's happened. Maybe Clemson is a team that's shown that it's being in that tier. They've obviously got a big test this weekend against Virginia Tech. I think from a big picture perspective, talking about Alabama, there's still a lot more to learn, like you said, because we've seen kind of two sides of the team. We've seen them not necessarily play a completely dominant game against Fresno State, which is still probably one of the worst teams in the FCS. We've seen parts of the defense really struggle against Colorado State. And then we've seen Alabama just go out and dismember Vanderbilt. I don't know which side of that coin Alabama is. I think we'll get a good sense of it this weekend against Ole Miss. That 27, 28-point line, whatever it is right now, my feeling is that reflects more of the perception of where Alabama is as a team now instead of where it actually is. I don't know if we know where Alabama actually is, but I think after you beat Vanderbilt 59-0 on the road, a 27-point spread reflects the perception of where Alabama is.
Talking to Ben Jones, my colleague at Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com. And to that point, Ben, I wonder if Alabama continues to play inconsistent. I'm not saying they're playing poorly, just not as consistent as we're used to seeing. Will we know anything with the games coming up? I mean, the way the SEC is this year, let's face it, it's not that great. And their next 4 games coming up, I don't know how much more we learn about Alabama, Mississippi, Texas A&M, Arkansas, and Tennessee before the bye week, and then you get into LSU, Mississippi State, and Auburn as 3 of their last 4 games. We'll certainly learn probably a lot about them then. But the next 4 games, I guess we'll learn a little bit about Alabama's pass defense this week. But I look at these next 4 games, and I don't see how any of those teams really mount much of a challenge.
Yeah, I think the schedule ramps up at least a little bit. I think that Vanderbilt and Ole Miss were probably a step up from Fresno State and Colorado State, and then I think Texas A&M and Arkansas will probably be another step up from that. What we can learn and what the opportunity is there is if Alabama goes out and wins all of those games by 20 points and kind of shows some of that consistency against teams that are improving, then that's something that we haven't seen at this point. That would be something that I think we could learn. Now, on the other hand, if you go out and you win against Texas A&M by 7 points, then you have to kick a late field goal against Arkansas to put that one away. Then I think you go back to the question that we had after week 3, which is what is this Alabama team? Is it as good as expected?